I've been fascinated by the concept of Atlantis. Ever since I had these conversations with Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock about the Younger Dryas impact theory and this concept that somewhere in the roughly around 11,000, 12,000 years ago, we were hit by a series of comets.
For centuries, the legend of Atlantis has captivated explorers, historians, and dreamers alike. Whispers of a mighty civilization, lost beneath the waves in a single day and night, have stirred the imagination since Plato first mentioned it in his dialogues over 2 millennia ago. Over time, the myth of Atlantis expanded beyond a philosophical allegory, becoming one of the most enduring mysteries in human history. Yet after decades of speculation, false leads, and outlandish theories, the mystery of Atlantis has finally been solved, and the implications are staggering. What has emerged not only confirms the ancient tales, but also validates long-dismissed conspiracy theories about global civilizations, hidden knowledge, and suppressed history. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The breakthrough began with a series of underwater anomalies detected in the eastern Atlantic, using new multispectrum satellite scanning technology originally developed for deep-sea mineral exploration. These scans revealed unnatural geometric formations beneath the ocean floor, west of the Strait of Gibraltar, in an area that had long been ruled out by mainstream archaeologists. Previously dismissed as mere topographic oddities or tectonic scars, the anomalies caught the attention of an independent group of researchers operating outside traditional academic circles. They pooled resources and conducted a multi-phase sonar mapping of the area, which revealed symmetrical stone structures, vast circular rings resembling city planning blueprints, and submerged roads stretching for miles. Initial skepticism gave way to intense scrutiny as 3D imaging confirmed that these were not natural formations. The rings matched Plato's descriptions almost precisely. Concentric circles of land and water, enormous in scale, aligned with cardinal directions. The outermost ring, heavily eroded, showed remnants of fortification and seawalls. At the center, what remained of a colossal acropolis stood toppled and broken, yet unmistakably artificial. Dated samples of the surrounding sediment placed the collapse around 11,600 years ago, exactly within the time frame given in ancient accounts, long thought to be exaggerated or symbolic. This discovery reignited age-old claims that Atlantis was not merely a myth, but a real civilization lost to cataclysm. Yet it was not just the location or the architecture that shocked the world, it was what was found inside. Divers recovered inscribed stones sealed in metallic containers, metal resembling orichalcum, the legendary substance said to have adorned Atlantis. The inscriptions were written in an unknown language, but the symbols bore striking similarities to several ancient scripts including Linear A, Sumerian cuneiform, and even pre-Columbian glyphs. AI-assisted translation provided partial clarity, references to celestial alignments, energy conduits, and catastrophic shifts in the Earth's magnetic field. One recovered tablet referred to a polar migration and the swallowing sea, alongside diagrams depicting the Earth with grid lines eerily similar to modern longitudinal and latitudinal systems. These revelations aligned with what conspiracy theorists had long suspected, that Atlantis was not just advanced, but was the pinnacle of pre-Ice Age human civilization. Far from being a myth, Atlantis appeared to have been a technologically and culturally sophisticated society, possibly far exceeding the capabilities of known ancient empires. The presence of advanced urban planning, the use of unknown metallurgy, and an apparent understanding of astronomy and geology hinted at a civilization that may have operated on a global scale. Suddenly, theories long mocked as pseudoscience came rushing back with newfound legitimacy. The concept of lost ancient high technology, routinely dismissed by mainstream science, now had physical support. Moreover, those who had proposed that Earth's history included massive resets caused by cosmic or geological events, once relegated to the fringes, were now being reconsidered in a new light. The paradigm was shifting and rapidly. The confirmation of Atlantis also shined a light on ancient global connections. Artifacts found within the submerged city had uncanny resemblances to relics from Egypt, the Indus Valley, and even Mesoamerican cultures. Decorative motifs, symbols, and building styles suggested a network of knowledge exchange that spanned continents long before modern understanding allows. How could such synchronicity exist among civilizations separated by oceans unless there had been a common progenitor? That question alone reopened debates on diffusionism versus independent development. But more provocatively, it reignited claims of a suppressed global past, one deliberately hidden or ignored. Among the most startling implications was the idea that historical records, particularly those preserved in religious, royal, and secret institutional archives, may have known about Atlantis all along. For decades, there have been whispers among conspiracy communities that private libraries in the Vatican, the British Museum, and clandestine societies held information about ancient civilizations that contradicted mainstream timelines. The newly discovered evidence validated many of those claims, and documents began to surface, leaked or declassified, that hinted at prior knowledge of the region's anomalies. Several 20th century expeditions, it turns out, had quietly explored the same coordinates but were shut down without public disclosure. A more sinister possibility began to take shape. That knowledge of Atlantis had been actively suppressed, not simply lost. Why would such a cover-up exist? The answer might lie in the implications for our understanding of human potential, the origins of civilization, and the true nature of global power structures. If a highly advanced society existed thousands of years before the rise of Mesopotamia and Egypt, then the linear narrative of human development, stone tools to pyramids to spaceflight, would need complete reworking. Institutions built upon that narrative would face existential crises. Religions that pinpoint humanity's beginnings to specific dates would be challenged. Educational systems would need to rewrite their foundational assumptions. And those in power who control the flow of historical knowledge might prefer that such disruptions remain buried. What emerged next only deepened the sense of awe and unease. Energy residues detected in the central ruins indicated electromagnetic anomalies not found in natural environments. Theorists had long speculated that Atlantis was powered by some form of crystal or resonance-based technology, ideas dismissed as fantasy. Yet ground-penetrating radar and material analysis revealed crystalline structures embedded within metallic framework, positioned with mathematical precision at key junctions in the city's grid. These structures resonated when subjected to certain frequencies, suggesting they once played a functional role, possibly in energy distribution, communications, or even climate control. If true, this would revolutionize our understanding of physics and engineering. Such technology, lost for millennia, could have reshaped our modern world had it been preserved. Instead, the idea that ancient humans may have discovered energy modalities still unknown to modern science and then lost them entirely was both tragic and exhilarating. It confirmed long-held suspicions that humanity has experienced not just linear progress, but cyclical rises and catastrophic collapses. Atlantis was not just the victim of a flood or earthquake. It was the casualty of a forgotten global disaster, perhaps triggered by a comet impact, solar flare, or pole shift, all hinted at in both the newly discovered records and global mythologies, but the implications reached further still. The recovery of genetic material from preserved human remains found in sedimentary enclosures, somewhat mummified by mineralization, showed genetic markers previously unknown to modern databases. These individuals shared traits across multiple modern human populations, including indigenous groups from distant continents. It lent support to the idea that Atlanteans had voyaged far and wide, settling and influencing other cultures long before history tells us it was possible. This global seafaring capability suggested a level of sophistication in navigation, shipbuilding, and geopolitical influence that rivaled anything seen until the Age of Exploration. This wasn't merely a lost city, it was a lost world. A world with language, culture, science, governance, and possibly even spiritual practices that tied humanity more deeply to the planet and cosmos. And the fact that it was buried beneath layers of sediment and oceanic pressure for over 10,000 years, only to now re-emerge, feels less like a coincidence and more like an awakening. Perhaps, as some had long proposed, humanity was meant to rediscover Atlantis at a moment of global crossroads, a time when environmental crises, social unrest, and technological upheaval demand that we look backward to move forward. Another significant implication of the discovery was the sudden credibility lent to legends from indigenous and ancient cultures across the globe. Stories of a sunken homeland, a great flood, and ancestors from the sea had been told by the Hopi, the Dogon, the Aborigines, and Polynesian tribes, all echoing the core themes of the Atlantean myth. These were not merely symbolic tales, they were memories, fractured, mythologized, and passed through generations. What had been labeled oral folklore was now gaining recognition as historical testimony. The arrogance of dismissing these accounts simply because they lacked written records was now seen for what it truly was, a blind spot in the academic worldview. Moreover, the finding cast new light on certain archaeological oddities, megalithic structures around the world whose construction techniques and astronomical alignments have defied explanation. Sites like Göbekli Tepe, the pyramids of Giza, and the ruins at Pumapunku now seemed less anomalous. Instead, they looked like cultural descendants or outposts of a vanished civilization with a shared architectural lineage. The alignment of these sites with solstices, equinoxes, and star systems mirrored the celestial references found in the Atlantean ruins. The pieces of a scattered puzzle were finally falling into place. The confirmation of Atlantis also sparked a renewed philosophical and existential discourse. If a civilization so advanced could be wiped from memory for over 10,000 years, what does that say about the permanence of our own? The fragile veneer of modern civilization, its dependence on digital infrastructure, fossil fuels, and geopolitics, seemed laughably vulnerable in contrast. Atlantis had mastered sustainable energy, long-distance communication, and potentially even a unified global culture, only to vanish in cataclysm. Humanity today, despite all our arrogance, teeters on a similar edge. The message of Atlantis, once thought to be a cautionary tale invented by philosophers, had returned in raw physical form. With the confirmation of Atlantis as a historical reality, the world was confronted not just with the remnants of a lost civilization, but with an entirely new category of knowledge. One that forces a re-evaluation of human capability, ancient intellect, and the vast gaps that remain in our understanding of early human society. The revelation shifted global attention to the deeper implications that lay hidden beneath the sheer spectacle of the find. Where Atlantis had once been an idle curiosity or the subject of fiction, it now became a key to decoding the broader tapestry of human origins. The existence of Atlantis suggested that human civilization may not be a linear progression from primitive to advanced, but instead a cyclical pattern of rise, collapse, and rebirth. This contradicts the traditional academic timeline, which places complex societies emerging only after the agricultural revolution around 10,000 years ago. The Atlantean evidence, however, paints a vastly different picture, one where agriculture, maritime trade, architectural sophistication, and perhaps even early forms of technology were already in motion thousands of years before what was previously considered the beginning of civilization. This means that our ancestors were not simply hunter-gatherers struggling for survival in isolated tribes. Instead, there was likely a thriving global network of trade, language, and scientific understanding that was catastrophically disrupted, either by natural disaster or internal conflict. The surviving knowledge from that collapse could have seeded the more familiar ancient cultures, Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and Mesoamerica, explaining the sudden and unexplained appearance of advanced practices in those societies. The concept of pristine civilization, the idea that complex societies arose independently and from scratch, is now under serious scrutiny. Notably, the idea that Atlantis functioned as a planetary hub for knowledge, especially in geoscience, energy systems, and spirituality, adds another layer to the discovery. The city's layout was not haphazard or merely aesthetic. It followed mathematical principles of sacred geometry, with radial symmetry and harmonic ratios embedded into its construction. This suggests that Atlantean society integrated science and spirituality, engineering and philosophy into a unified worldview that defies modern compartmentalization. Where today science is siloed away from the metaphysical, Atlantis appeared to operate on a system where the two were intertwined. This raises intriguing questions about consciousness and human potential. If the Atlanteans viewed energy, thought, and matter as parts of a single continuum, perhaps their technology was fundamentally different from ours. There's now speculation that their tools did not rely solely on mechanical force, but may have involved resonance, frequency manipulation, or even a now lost understanding of magnetics and gravitational balance. Some of the discovered artifacts hinted at interfaces that reacted to touch without mechanical switches, responding perhaps to bioelectric fields or conscious intention. This would suggest that they had tapped into a realm of science that merges with what we now consider esoteric or even mystical. In parallel, new attention turned toward ancient maps and texts, especially those long discredited or relegated to the fringes of historical academia. The Piri race map, for example, which showed parts of Antarctica supposedly ice-free long before modern discovery, is being re-examined in light of Atlantean cartographic capability. Scholars are now investigating whether some of these maps are not merely medieval oddities, but copies of much older Atlantean originals preserved and passed through secret channels. The implications of this are vast. If true, it would mean that much of early exploration was guided not by trial and error, but by inherited knowledge that predated even the earliest dynastic cultures. The social organization of Atlantis is also becoming a subject of intense debate. The layout of the city and the recovered tablets point toward a civilization with a hierarchical but highly collaborative structure. It is hypothesized that the central zones were reserved for governance and research, while outer rings housed artisans, traders, and spiritual practitioners. Unlike modern centralized power models, Atlantis appeared to operate on a decentralized system of self-regulating communities connected through ritual, resource flow, and shared purpose. This system may have reduced conflict and fostered innovation, enabling the society to flourish for millennia before its downfall. Speculation has arisen that this system extended beyond the city itself. If Atlantis had outposts across the globe, evidenced by megalithic structures found in locations as distant as Easter Island and the highlands of Peru, then the civilization functioned more as a global commonwealth than an isolated empire. These outposts might have specialized in different aspects of life: agriculture, metallurgy, astronomical observation, spiritual practice. They could have been nodes in a sophisticated planetary network, each contributing to a shared cultural and technological reservoir. The remnants of these outposts may still be standing today, misunderstood as disconnected anomalies rather than remnants of a unified civilization. Another aspect of the discovery that demands attention is the potential that Atlantis had a radically different understanding of life and death. Some of the recovered inscriptions and artwork depict symbolic representations of reincarnation, star beings, and multidimensional existence. While such themes are not uncommon in ancient religious traditions, the Atlantean expressions of these ideas were both systematic and encoded with mathematical precision. It suggests they might not have merely believed in the afterlife, but had developed structured methods to map or even influence consciousness across states of being. This could explain why so many ancient traditions around the world speak of enlightenment, ascension, and celestial journeys with striking thematic alignment. In this context, Atlantis becomes more than a lost city. It becomes a cultural template for a lost way of being. It represents a civilization that may have achieved balance between the material and the metaphysical, between individual freedom and collective purpose. Such a model starkly contrasts with the modern world, where fragmentation, competition, and existential anxiety dominate. Atlantis challenges the assumption that technological progress necessarily entails social and environmental decay. Instead, it posits that an advanced society can be holistic, cooperative, and in tune with both Earth and cosmos. The confirmation of Atlantis has also begun to unearth philosophical tensions that had simmered beneath the surface of academic debate for decades. The rigid insistence on empirical data, while foundational to scientific progress, has now shown its limitations. Many truths about Atlantis came to light not through mainstream institutions, but through independent researchers, intuitive explorers, and those who followed dreams, myths, and ancestral memory. This has reignited the age-old conflict between rationalism and intuition, between left brain and right brain approaches to knowledge. The rediscovery of Atlantis is also a rediscovery of alternative epistemologies, ways of knowing that do not fit neatly into the scientific method but have their own validity. It's also impossible to ignore the geopolitical tremors triggered by the find. Nations and institutions are scrambling to claim jurisdiction, ownership, or custodianship over the newly unearthed site. The area is now a hotbed of international interest, with competing narratives arising over who has the right to study, excavate, and interpret the site. Some fear that the Atlantean knowledge may be co-opted or weaponized, as history has shown with every major scientific breakthrough. The idea that ancient energy systems or advanced materials science could fall into the hands of exclusive entities raises serious ethical questions. Who gets access? Who decides what's released and what's hidden? As the implications sink in, the public consciousness has begun to shift in subtle but profound ways. People are questioning long-held beliefs, not just about history, but about their place in it. If Atlantis represents a former zenith of human achievement, then perhaps we are not at the pinnacle of civilization, but at a point of rediscovery. This has given rise to movements rooted in neo-Atlantean ideals, sustainable living, sacred geometry and architecture, integrative medicine, and a return to earth-based wisdom. The renewed interest in ancient practices, once considered fringe, is now part of a larger cultural reevaluation. The veil has lifted, and what once was ridiculed is now respected. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Atlantis being real? Do you believe the mystery is solved? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.